Our pronouns are told you so. The Daily Mojo.
Right now, I know that people are having a tough time with their money. There's more month at the end of the paycheck than there is money. There's mortgage rates are going up. Interest rates are going up. We did get a little, I guess it's good news from the Fed. Was it last week? They're not raising interest rates?
Yeah, actually, it was yesterday. Feels like last week because everything's been so crazy. But
I know.
they didn't raise again. But the more important thing about it, in my opinion, was just that Powell, who's been just like this stickler for the last 18 months, had softened his tone quite a bit. And so what that means in general, or what that means to me, is that like things are working, especially at the level that he's looking at things at, which we already know, right? I mean, it's like you just said, the paycheck isn't going as far. The inflation is, technically coming down, but what you got to remember is inflation stacks on top of itself. So even though it's only 4% year over year this year, it's still 30 to 40% more expensive to buy stuff than it was 3 to 4 years ago, right? So you end up in this spot where it's like you've got the paychecks aren't lasting as long, and then, oh, by the way, we've raised all these rates, which has made things just much more expensive anytime you're financing a purchase. And so those things are coming to a head. And right now the stock market likes it because they're like, oh yeah, they're not raising rates anymore. But you got to remember, the reason that they wouldn't raise rates is because that means they're being successful in destruction, right? And that's a demand destruction on both the consumer end and on the business end. And so maybe we have a good quarter because it's the fourth quarter and everyone's happy during the holidays. But when reality sets in heading into next quarter, we could see stuff get real bad real fast. So on the surface, it's good. But the reason it's good is because it's starting to get bad. It's crazy.
What you said right there, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what you said right there is kind of like 2023 in a nutshell. It's getting better because everything is getting bad. It's just like, it's kind of a slogan for the year, really. Right. I see what you're saying in that the Fed, and let me ask you this, and I probably asked you this last time we talked, but does the Fed know what the hell they're doing anyway?
Well, they pretend they do, right? But if we look back historically, it's like everything else, right? Like, I mean, you guys already mentioned it in a previous segment. It's hard to feel like we're not all in this like one big facade and that everything's rigged and we're just along for the show, right? And when you look at it, like, does the Fed know what they're doing? Well, the Fed has never been right, like ever. I mean, they're always either early to the party or, they're never early. They're always late to the party. And then they always, leave. They're like the last one standing and the last one to leave the party, right? So I don't necessarily think this time is any different. The thing that they have working for them is that there was so much money pumped into the economy with COVID that stripping that money out, like people, and plus they just took away everybody's ability to do anything, right? So now, even though like the money may be stretched, people are still like, no, I didn't get to do anything during COVID. I'm going to go do my bucket list item because, half of them believe that, they were a second away from death. And the other half are just pissed off that they weren't able to do the fun stuff. Right. So that's kind of like where we're at. But the reality is there's only so much money, right? I mean, we're not our government. We don't have an unlimited credit line. And because of that, that's going to hurt the consumer, and eventually that's going to hurt the country too. And it's already starting to show a little bit. So there's a huge.
In what way?
All this.
When you say that, no. When you say that, because the federal, the national debt, rather, it is so staggeringly monumental. I mean. Yep. 33 trillion. It's hard to actually visualize and grasp a trillion. 33 of those is like I mean, we're all of that in debt. That has to, that's having an effect on our savings, on our investments, is it not?
Oh, that's having an effect on everything. That's why a lot of the world is like, I don't know, is US still kind of the place to park our money? Like that's starting to kind of be a question. That wasn't a question 10 years ago. It was like, oh, we're in trouble. We just put the money in the US. That's the safest place on earth. And plus we're adding another, 1.5 trillion a year to that 33 trillion, at least, right? So and that's where, as the government, when you look at this, it's like, oh my gosh, we're spending more money on interest than we are in defense spending right now, and we've got 2 wars going on. So that's the think that that's not going to affect things is silly, and that's where I would say, okay, for everyone who's like, oh my gosh, I can't buy a house, our interest rate's ever going to come down. Well, I think they have to, because the government can't keep paying 5% or plus on their debt and keep adding all this debt. The only way that they can sustain things is they need to increase revenue. What is that? That would mean increasing taxes, right? Or they need to decrease expenses. Well, we know that there's not a politician in the world who's willing to cut spending. And so how can you cut spending? Well, you can reduce the debt servicing cost, right? Doesn't mean it's really going to change anything. And I know that for you and me, if things are getting bad in the household, at some point we got to sit down and look at the expenses and look at the income and be like, hey man, we can't do this anymore, right? The government has never played that game, and they can continue to kick the can down the road, and that's what they would be doing by lowering rates. But they may not have a choice, because the consumer is struggling, and the problem with lowering rates is that could push inflation back up. So it's like you just got all these things that are like, oh my goodness, what's gonna break first, and when it breaks, how bad is it gonna be? And I think that's like the thing that can be really scary is we could end up in another financial crisis, except for this time is an everything bubble.
Like the Great Depression bad? That
maybe. I would at least average out the Great Recession and the Great Depression and kind of put those together, because I think it would be worse than the Great Recession from the standpoint that this is an everything debt bubble, not just a housing debt bubble that is just growing and growing and growing. I sure hope that we're not like Great Depression Part 2 or that could be really bad. But you can't really argue against that as a scenario. Yeah.
Right. So likely it's going to be somewhere, in the middle, which makes total sense. What advice do you give to people right now? I mean, now that we've told them the world is going to end and everything's on fire. What does a person do with their investments, their savings? They've got some money saved up. What do you do? What's safe at this point in time?
Well, the world hasn't ended yet, right? There's a lot of stuff that's like on paper, we're still technically risk on, although I think that could flip in the next 5 to 7 days. But number one is as much as I hate to say this because no one likes to hear it, hey, the way that you get successful in life is by having a budget, right? From a financial standpoint, right? If you spend less than you bring in, you're going to be okay, generally speaking, right? So have a budget, eliminate the consumer debt. Those are like the credit cards, auto loans, like that type of stuff, like attack that right now, right? And if you're scared, it's okay to put your money in a money market, because guess what? They're paying 5.2 to 5.4% right now. So you can get paid to wait until this doom and gloom scenario occurs. And when that happens, don't be afraid to jump in and buy stuff that maybe you consume yourself, right? Like if you're an Apple lover and Apple drops to $100 a share, maybe you want to buy some Apple. If you're a Netflix lover, maybe you're going to buy some Netflix, right? So those are things that you can do on the back end of all of this. On the front end, if you're invested right now, you just need to be flexible and disciplined, right? You need to be in a scenario where, hey, I'm owning the stock market right now, but if it hits this level, I'm out, right? And that's what we do with all of our portfolios is we already have a predetermined reason to get in or get out based on what's going on. And you know, we're still leaning in right now, but to think that we're not ready to kind of move to the sidelines if things break down, like we're ready and we're willing to watch it fall, and we're not going to ride the roller coaster down to the bottom. You know, you don't have to do that. Like it tells you that you have to like buy and hold and just like ride the roller coaster. And the reality is there's a lot of metrics where you can, maybe you're not out at the top or maybe you're not in at the bottom, but gosh, if you can eliminate that stress of like a minus 30 to 40%, you're going to have a lot better chance of being financially successful because you'll be willing to invest on the other side, right? When you ride that roller coaster all the way down, you're like, I am never doing this again.
Right.
So, yeah, we're here to help. You know, I got into this business in 2005. When I was growing up, I thought I was going to be a math teacher and a coach. I decided I like working one-on-one more. And so financial planning really kind of fits for me. And so I get to be a money coach now. And I do things a little bit different. So I think different is good, especially in the current landscape that we're in. And we're going to stick to our guns and hold and just be there for our clients because we work for them. We don't work for some big company. And I think that's another advantage when you're shopping for an advisor is get someone who works for you. Don't get someone who has to meet a specific quota by this big company. You know what I mean? So.
The First Amendment.
Did you know that you have rights? The Constitution says you do.
Lives here. Watch and listen at thedailymojo.com.